Hi, I'm back. Dr. Jenn in the house. Hey, hey. Dr. Jenn in the house. Hey, Anyway, okay. So I am here for us to talk about the top 8 women's health tips. Things that we just need to think about to optimize our health and have us in the best tip-top shape possible. So first one is cervical cancer screening. Cervical cancer is one of the leading causes of death in women's health in the world. However, when the appropriate screening is performed, this risk is reduced significantly. So cervical cancer screening can be done in 2 forms. So this is by taking a sample of the cervical cells and analyzing them and seeing if there's any abnormalities that put someone at higher risk of developing cervical cancer. There's something also known as HPV testing. Human papilloma virus is what HPV stands for. It's a virus that you can get through sexual contact. Even groin-to-groin contact can place someone at risk of developing HPV. So HPV causes abnormalities on the cervix and it can increase the risk of developing cervical cancer. But if you get the HPV vaccine, you can start getting that once you're 9 years old, and it goes all the way to 45 years old. If you're between 9 and 15, only 2 vaccines. If 15 to 45, there's 3 vaccines that you can get. So keep up with your cervical cancer screening, get your vaccine, reduce your risk of getting cervical cancer, something that is so preventable. Next thing that I think about is mammograms. So it's important that once you're older than 40 years old, and this is if you're low risk for developing breast cancer, but of course, if you have any genetic abnormalities or there's a significant family history of breast cancer, this puts you into a different category. And it's best to talk to your provider to determine when exactly you should get that screening done. Mammograms go from age 40 to 74 years old. And after 74, you don't have to get any more mammograms. But if you decide with shared decision making, so between that patient and her provider, if they decide that they want to continue doing mammograms annually, that's up to them. They can do that as an option. Next thing is blood pressures. So your ideal blood pressure should be less than 130 over 80. If it's higher than that, so important that you see your primary care provider, you do the appropriate lifestyle changes, start exercising. I'm going to get into those 2 things a little bit later to reduce your risk of continuing to have high blood pressure. If we see that this is a kind of perpetual thing for you, you might need to be on antihypertensive medications in order to help control that. So having high blood pressures is something that doesn't really hurt your body, right? If your blood pressures are exceedingly high, it's nothing that hurts. It doesn't feel like your leg got cut off or your arm got cut off, but that can place you at risk of having a stroke. So analogy that I always give patients is think about, a little plastic straw, the straws that we get when we go to the fast food joint. So take that straw and now take a water fire hydrant, and this is like the fire hydrant that the firemen bring. So take that straw and now put that water at that high pressure that goes to the hydrant through that. And what's going to happen? That straw is going to bust. It's going to bust wide open. And that's what can happen if you have really high blood pressures. You have very, 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 very small blood vessels in the brain, and those blood vessels can just literally burst open with super, super high blood pressures. You can also have things like kidney failure if your blood pressures are exceedingly high. So please make sure your blood pressures are at goal. Next things I think about are cholesterol levels or your lipid levels. So lipids and cholesterols, these are things that are made in the liver. These things are very important for making hormones, even like sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen are made from things like cholesterol. But when these levels are exceedingly high, it causes a traffic jam in our arteries. And what happens? For my people that are from Atlanta, what happens when you're on I-85 and there's traffic? Everything's at a standstill. So what happens when your blood vessels get clogged up? Everything's at a standstill. Blood doesn't flow to the places that it needs to. This can lead to things like strokes, heart attacks. So very important with diet, exercise, and if still your cholesterol and your lipid levels are high, being placed on a medication that can help lower these. So now, diet and exercise. So for exercise, it's so important that we're getting 30 minutes of exercise in physical activity every day. And something that I say for patients is, after eating a meal and it's a nice day outside, just go ahead and take you a little walk around the park. That's something that can help get in some exercise for you. Or if you're at home, just get up ever so often and just kind of like walk in place. There are free programs on YouTube. I really love Fitness Blender. They have very focused exercises for abs, glutes, legs. Blogilates is another one that I like following as well. But there's so many exercise programs. Next, we have to think about diet. So diet, I feel like, is such a hard thing. But diet is really so much more important than exercise. Because think about it. If someone runs like 5 miles every day, but every day they eat a whole sheet of cake, what's going to happen? You're still going to gain a lot of weight.
Get in my belly!
So I always tell patients that dieting is 80% of losing weight and exercise is 20%. Diet is everything. Staying away from a lot of sugary, fatty substances, reducing the carbs, so low carb diet, and then also reducing the amount of fatty, fried, greasy substances you have, lowering your sodium intake as well. So, it's so much easier to say that and eat more fruits and eat more vegetables and stay away from all these substances. But something that I always tell patients is, everything is about progression. It's not about perfection, but just progression. So if every day you eat 5 Snicker bars, cut down on 1 Snicker bar a day, or cut down on half of one of those Snicker bars a day. So you're now eating 4.5 Snicker bars. And then maybe in the next week, take out 1 full Snicker bar. So now you're only eating 4. So just incrementally reduce the amount of poor substances that you're eating, and then incrementally increase the amount of good substances that you need to eat. Everything is just about progress. You don't have to try and fix it all in one day. You don't need to be perfect every day. No one's really perfect. It's just about progression, not perfection. So the next thing that I tell patients is know what your blood sugar readings are. So important to have diabetes screening performed, especially for those patients that are older than 45, that are obese, that have multiple risk factors for having diabetes. So do they have a child that was greater than 9 pounds? Do they have multiple family members that have obesity? Are they overweight and, African American or Latino or Asian Pacific Islander? So kind of all these things can place you at higher risk of having diabetes. And diabetes is kind of like those other things like blood pressures. It's nothing that you feel. It doesn't hurt when your blood sugars are high. But having high blood sugars can cause for you to have kidney disease, can have problems with your vision. It can also clog up your arteries and lead to you having heart attacks and strokes too. So important that you know what your blood sugar readings are. And that's something that is tested with something called A1C level. Or you can have like a random blood sugar level done, fasting blood sugar. There's different tests that can be performed. Next thing that I think about is just lifestyle things. So try and stop smoking cigarettes. If you do smoke cigarettes, cigarette use puts you at high risk of developing lung cancer, throat cancer, and then also you are going into debt and making the big bad tobacco company richer. And they don't deserve your life or your money. Don't give it to them. There are specific medications that you can take. There are nicotine supplements that you can take. Also, therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy that you can take to help the process of stopping smoking. And then also try to cut down, if you do drink alcohol, try and limit your intake of alcohol. So excessive alcohol use, not only does it make you inebriated and you are not thinking in your right state of mind, thus you're making a lot of bad decisions, but it can also really affect your liver and cause for someone to have a lot of liver damage. So let's try and cut down on our alcohol use. And ideally, they say less than 2 drinks a day. Last thing that I think about is sexually transmitted diseases. So a lot of sexually transmitted diseases in females don't really cause you a lot of symptoms. In males, causes a lot of things. But like chlamydia, gonorrhea, women don't really present with symptoms. Syphilis, if you're not really sure of what to look for, you might miss it. HIV, you also might not feel anything until it's develop into full-blown AIDS. So it's so important if you are younger than 25 years old that you get tested annually if you're sexually active or if you're in high risk of having sexually transmitted diseases. So multiple partners have had a risk of STD in the past. It's important that you get your STD testing. And then even if you are like not in a high risk group, it's always important to have just 1 lifetime HIV testing. So please get tested on your STDs if you're less than 25 annually, or if you're even concerned at all, just get tested. So the risk of not having any of these treated, of course, some of these STDs are not curable. HIV, herpes are things that are not curable, but also they cause infertility. It can cause damage to the fallopian tubes. So important. You get tested and you get treated if you have something. And also that your partners get tested as well. The last thing that I think about is birth control. So if you are sexually active, it's so important that not only you use condoms to protect you from STDs, but also you are on appropriate birth control. And I always tell patients, birth control prevents pregnancies. It does not prevent STDs. For me, I'm a big proponent of being in a marital relationship if you are going to be sexually active, but that is a topic that we can have at a later time. So birth control is something that's super important. And I'm actually going to have one other session where I speak about the different types of birth control in more detail, but I'll just kind of briefly talk about them. There is a class, and I'll have a little diagram so we can see it all. So your first line class that I think patients should think about in terms of birth control are your IUDs, your Nexplanon, your Depo shots. Those are great. That's not something where you have to remember on a daily basis, and they're highly effective. The next class that I think about are birth control pills, the patch, and the NuvaRing. Methods like figuring out when you ovulate or the pull-out method, spermicides, those are really not that effective. So, hope this helps. 8 things that we should think about when we are trying to optimize our health. The last thing that I wanted to tell you guys is that you need to remember that you're awesome. You were put on this earth for a purpose. You were put on this earth to touch lives. You were put on this earth to make a difference. So never forget that. Never let anyone tell you that you are not worthy. Never let anyone tell you that you can't go past your mistakes. Never let anyone tell you that you can't, because you can and you will, and you're amazing. So I hope this helps you all, and have a good night. Bye.